I'm Katie Shanahan-Linder. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for European Studies here at UNC, located right here in this building. I am really thrilled for us to kick off the semester with what will surely be a fantastic talk by a very interesting person and a wonderful colleague. So thanks for joining us tonight in the discussion. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by the UNC Duke Consortium the Middle East. Carl Ernst, our consortium director, is here. We're very glad to be working with our colleagues because this tonight is also the kickoff for the Turkey Today lecture series that we are going to be having this fall and running again into the spring. The next event is on October 19th. Also in this building, Professor Casaba will come from the University of Washington, also to talk about recent events in Turkey. So stay tuned. Check your email for that information. And join us for lots of other events. Next week we have one on Thursday on Brexit, another exciting topic that Europe is facing. Europe.unc.eu is up here on the screen. Continue to join us. Without further ado, Director of our Center for European Studies, John Stevens, will introduce our speaker.
Thank you. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Aykan Erdemir. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies in Washington. He's a former Turkish member of Parliament from 2011 to 2015 in Parliament. He served on the EU-Turkey Joint Parliamentary Committee, the EU Harmonization Committee, and the Ad Hoc Parliamentary Committee on the IT sector and the Internet. He is an outspoken defender of pluralism, minority rights, and religious freedoms in the Middle East. He has been at the forefront of the struggle against religious persecution, hate crime, and hate speech in Turkey. He's a founding member of the International Panel of Parliamentarians for Religious Freedom and Belief. For all of this work, Dr. Erdemir was awarded the Stephanos Prize for Religious Freedom in 2016. After completing his BA in International Relations at Bilkent University in Ankara, Dr. Erdemir received an MA in Middle Eastern Studies and a PhD in Anthropology and Middle Eastern Studies from Harvard. He has taught at his alma mater, Bilkent University in Ankara, and at the Mideast Technical University. At METU, he was, I have here, graduate director of the German-Turkish Master's Program in Social Science, but I think you were also a founder of that program, right? And that is actually the connection direct connection with us, because that was founded by METU and Humboldt. And Humboldt is one of our partners in the Transatlantic Master's Program. And so they asked us a few years ago to join that consortium, and we did. And I'll come back to that in a minute. He's the co-author Antagonistic Tolerance, a 2016 book, Competitive Sharing of Religious Sites and Spaces. He's edited 7 books. I won't give you all the titles of all those books. And he's the author of numerous scholarly articles and journalistic articles. I actually met Aykan last year when they were having a reunion of this German-Turkish studies program that he was instrumental in starting. And so I went to this alumni reunion, and Aykan gave one of the talks at this reunion. I thought it was one of the most interesting talks I'd ever heard. So as soon as the failed coup happened, I told Katie, I said, listen, we really need to invite Aykan to give a talk. And so we were thinking in terms of flying him in from Turkey. And then I said, you need to find out where he is. And so then she found out he was in Washington, so it was going to be a lot cheaper than flying him in from Turkey. But anyway, I'm really delighted to have him. And I know this is going to be a great talk because his talk last year was really fine. Oh, you got one? You're wired.
So thank you for the kind introduction. Please raise your hand if you can't hear me. Okay. You can all hear me. Thanks again for the kind invitation, kind introduction. Yes, we have quite a history. We always joke about it, that setting up a Turkish-German joint program means defeating both the Prussian as well as the Ottoman bureaucracy, and we managed to do that with Katie and the Humboldt colleagues. So a project that I have always been proud of being part of. And then, sadly, I had to quit it because I was running for elected office in Turkey, which shows I'm not that wise after all. But, after 4 years in Turkish Parliament, then I decided that I should do more work in policy and not necessarily in politics per se. Now today, the topic is, let's say, one that leads to ambivalent emotions in all of us, because I will be talking about opportunities, real or imagined, realized or missed, as well as challenges, real or imagined, and challenges with potentially dire consequences. Now, I'm sure you have all followed with equal confusion Turkey's aborted July 15 coup. Turkey is no stranger to coups, quote-unquote successful and failed coups. 1960, 62, 63, 71, 80, 97, which was called the postmodern coup, 2007, which was called the e-coup because it came through a website, and then July 15, which is pretty much one coup every decade. But I have to warn you that this was something different. Meaning, even a Turkey that's used to one coup a decade, on the average, neither saw this coming, nor was ready to grapple with the traumatic consequences. Now, let me start with a self-critique. In April, Washington Post asked me, there are all these pieces about the potential coup in Turkey. What do you think? They asked. And I said, there's absolutely, and I'm quoting myself, there's absolutely no likelihood of a coup. The era of coup d'etats is over in Turkey. And since then I come back to my comment and I say, oh, oops, I dropped a word there. There's absolutely no likelihood of a successful coup, I should have said. Now, why was I so wrong? Because I thought that everyone in Turkey, including military officers and coup plotters, had the basic understanding of Turkish society and politics, that coups are no longer possible. But clearly, I overestimated the coup plotters and some of the military officers' grasp of things. Now, let's commemorate the 241, as of today, victims of the coup. 241 Turkish citizens, including minors, women, elders, fought against the coup plotters and paid, most dearly, they paid with their lives to prevent a coup. And this is the first time in Turkish history. So that's the first, meaning a popular resistance against the coup that has led to a failure of the coup. But what's also unique is that there has never been this kind of bloodshed, senseless violence. My former workplace, Parliament, was bombed while it was in session. The police headquarters in Ankara was bombed. The police special forces barracks were bombed. People were machine gunned by tanks on Turkey's Bosphorus Bridge, on the streets of Ankara. So that Turkey has never seen this level of brutality and destruction in the process of a coup. So if your Turkish colleagues and friends are traumatized, if they have a difficult time expressing their feelings. If they're not acting right, bear with us, because this really was traumatizing for us. And if you're not thinking straight, I'm not saying excuse us, but at least you can have empathy why we are not getting things straight. We are still too much, I think, traumatized and terrorized by this bloody coup. It's a time when we thought the era of coups was over. Now, what would have happened had the coup succeeded? Let me also state that, because nowadays, and in fact my talk will also be about the repercussions of the coup, but it's important to ask a counterfactual. Had the coup succeeded, there would be executions, so we have 241 people who were killed by the plotters, but many more would be killed. Possibly a civil war in Turkey, more destruction around the country, a suspension of rule of law and due process, a potential economic collapse, and Turkey drifting away from transatlantic values, Turkey's European Union accession process possibly coming to an end, and Turkey moving away from the Council of Europe and European Convention on Human Rights. Now, the skeptics in the audience might tell me that's pretty much what happened after the coup. Yes, we'll come to that. But had the coup failed, this would be the situation in Turkey, and I think it would be catastrophic proportions. Now, let's come back to the post-coup Turkey, post-July 15 Turkey. I have to underline one thing before. So the citizens' resistance, all opposition parties coming together in support of the parliamentary democratic regime, those were the big gains of the fair for Turkey. It seems that we now have a clear norm against coups. And when I say all opposition parties, please bear in mind, I'm talking about 3 political parties who are die-hard opponents of President Erdogan's one-man rule and authoritarianism. There is no love lost between the opposition and Turkey's increasingly autocratic leader. But at the same time, all 3 parties, including the pro-Kurdish HDP, came out in support of the elected government and the parliamentary democratic regime. I think this is very significant for Turkish history. And I think this has also taught President Erdogan a lesson. Because he always assumed he solely rests on his 40 to 50% support base, and everyone else is out there to get him. But when the push came to shove, all the opposition parties, people all across the Turkish political spectrum, stood behind a president they don't like at all. Which is, I think, a great win for Turkey's democracy. Now, the coup is defeated, but Turkey's key issues, key shortcomings around coups are still there. Lack of accountability for the military, a proper civilian-military relations, a culture of impunity that has led to the repeat of these coup attempts, lack of transparency in the military, and so on and so forth. So, yes, there is now a spirit of national unity. There is a feeling of consensus in public, but in fact, none of these structural issues are being addressed. So that's one important caveat I would like to raise at this point. So my talk is basically a question about this so-called spirit of national unity. And I'm saying, is this the beginning of a new era? Are the opportunities real? Or is this just a facade? Or is this just a veneer? Is this just a cloak hiding something darker in Turkey? And I'll try to lay out my case, and you can decide for your own. Now, let me first try to make the case for a new spirit in Turkey. Right after the coup, in a pretty unprecedented event, the Prime Minister showed up at the Turkish Parliament at an extraordinary session and thanked all political parties and party leaders in person. Now, you might wonder what's so special about this. This is just common civility. It's something we lacked. This never happened in the last decade. The parliament that I served in was simply a parliament about polarization. That Prime Minister back then, Erdogan, could never take a minute to thank the opposition, to name the opposition parties in person. So when this happened with the new Prime Minister Yildirim, the day after the coup, that was something special for Turkish citizens. The president hosted the opposition leaders in his palace. Now you're wondering, what's strange about this? Of course, heads of state meet with political leaders, not in Turkey. In fact, that day was the first time the main opposition leader, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the CHP leader, set foot at the new presidential palace. Because there were a lot of controversies around the presidential palace. There was a boycott of the palace. But that was the first day when the president could invite him for this all-inclusive meeting, and when he could end his boycott and show up at the presidential palace. Now, of course, there's a very important caveat. And let me not gloss over the nuances. That is, the pro-Kurdish HDP was not invited. So that's maybe one footnote we have to keep in mind. Yes, we are talking about the spirit of national unity. The president invites all political leaders to his palace, President Erdogan, but not the pro-Kurdish HDP, which is the third largest party in Turkish parliament, which is the second major opposition party. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there was this 1.5 million to 2 million rally in Istanbul, attended again by all political leaders. Again, the pro-Kurdish HDP was not invited, but all others showed up, which was unprecedented in Turkish history. All parties, with the exception of the pro-Kurdish HDP, holding a joint rally. And it's not just political leaders. There was also all members of, all religious leaders of Turkish minorities. So there was the head of the Jewish community, the Greek Orthodox community, the Armenian community, the Syrian community, and it was quite an unprecedented coming together. But again, let me give you a caveat. The heads of Turkey's religious communities, religious minority communities, sat there in national unity spirit, applauded the political leaders, who made constant references to infidels, Byzantine seeds, crusaders, and so on and so forth. So, again, it shows that there's always two sides to the coin in the Turkish political context. Turkish politics is so much ingrained with hate, prejudice, anti-minority bias, that even when minority religious leaders show up at a national unity rally, politicians fail to appreciate what's going on, and you can call these slips of tongue, or you can call this a blatant, this hate speech targeting the minorities in their presence. Whatever you call it, this is the reality in Turkey. So there is a lot of gray, and I try to paint a very grayish picture today, not black or white. Now, I would like to have a short detour here about the post-coup situation of minorities in Turkey. So, what has this brought to Turkey? The fact that all the minorities supported the elected government, they issued joint declarations, not only Christian and Jewish minorities, also Turkey's Alevi and Shiite minorities. In fact, I remember there was this one case where a post-op transsexual joined the rallies in support of President Erdogan, who is known to be quite a homophobic person. So a lot of people saw this as a great opportunity. They said, see, in this polarized society, people all across the board, religious minorities, sexual minorities, ethnic minorities, there are a lot of Kurds, Arabs, people from all walks of life, standing behind the elected government. But in the aftermath of the coup, unfortunately, that did not lead to a more inclusive atmosphere, climate. Just to give you a quick overview of what happened in the month and a half since the failed coup. Immediately the next day, anti-coup protests spilled over into attacks against churches. A Catholic church in Trabzon and a Protestant church in Malatya were attacked. There was an attack, a hate attack against an Armenian school in Istanbul. There were 2 attacks against an Alevi worship hall, a Cemevi in Istanbul, the worship hall where I also did part of my doctoral research. A French tourist was mistaken, a Turk was mistaken to be a French Christian and was beaten by mistake. In Gaziantep, tourists were attacked, Christian tourists were attacked as infidels, and they were kind of kicked out of the city. And a development I just became aware of, apparently some individuals, we don't know who they are, a group of individuals are fabricating op-eds on behalf of a retired US ambassador and publishing it in various outlets in the US to smear the ecumenical patriarch located in Istanbul as one of the coup plotters, together with the CIA and the Gülen community. And of course now there's an outrage because this not only puts the ecumenical patriarch at risk, but also is dwindling flock in Istanbul and Turkey. So clearly, in the last 4 to 5 days, despite the spirit of national unity, despite the minorities joining in this celebration of parliamentary democracy, things have gone the opposite way for them. Life has become more precarious for them. Part of it has to do with the ubiquitous hate speech, conspiracy theories, smear campaigns in Turkey's media. Those of you who follow Turkish media know that it's not necessarily the bastion of free speech. Turkey, as of today, with 35 new colleagues jailed today, as of this morning, is now the world's leading jailer of journalists. And many of them are now detained, not yet arrested. Turkey now has 30 days of detention, and then many of them will have long pre-trial arrests, up to 5 years. It used to be 10 years. You could be arrested for up to 10 years in Turkey, pre-trial arrest. And then after 10 years, courts will say, oops, sorry, you just wasted 10 years of your life. And now it's just 5, thanks to the EU accession process. So some of these journalists might be looking forward to 5 years in pre-trial detention before they can be tried as free individuals. So there is a lot of, these days, when you check your mainstream Turkish newspapers, you'll see that the coup is the work of foreigners. It's an American coup, it's a Zionist coup, it's the Jews, it's the Germans, it's the Americans, it's the NATO, it's the Christians, it's the Crusaders. And this is like full front page smear and conspiracy theory. Now in this context, of course, Turkey's ethnic and religious minorities are increasingly suspect. And outrageous theories are being propagated in either government-owned or controlled or funded media. Just to give you one example, Fethullah Gülen, the reclusive cleric who is based here in the US, in South exile, and who is believed by at least two-thirds of the Turkish citizens to be the mastermind of the coup, was presented in Turkish media as born from a Jewish mother, an Armenian father, and a member of Vatican's highest council of priests. Now, sure, this immediately puts Turkey's Jews and Armenians and Catholics at risk. In fact, the attack against the Armenian school came the day after such ludicrous smear campaigns. And so this is, I think, the climate Turkey will continue to be living in. that's one of the reasons why not only members of the minorities, but also the Turkish journalists will be independent and critical journalists will continue to be at risk, and they will live a precarious existence. Now, when we take a look at politics, let's switch from society to politics. Do we see a new era of consensus? Do we see a new era of working together? The opposition and the government, the elected government, kind of leaving their differences aside and kind of taking a step toward one another in this new environment. There are two obstacles to it. One is the declaration of state of emergency. There is now a 3-month state of emergency in Turkey, which is very understandable. Any European Union country or North American country with this kind of a coup attempt, trust me, would have a state of emergency. But there is an additional element there, and that is Turkey also suspended the European Convention on Human Rights, which to me is not only suspicious, but it's scary. Right now, you can be detained in Turkey up to 30 days without having access to an attorney or your family. Now, Turkey's recent experience with similar provisions prove that this only leads to torture. And this leads to fabricated affidavits, forced confessions, and people dying under custody. So it is not a very a bright picture for Turkey. Now, in this state, what happens is the government has a new right to run the country with decrees having the force of law. That is, they can just issue decrees from the Council of Ministers that don't need to be discussed and voted in the parliament. Now, this is, of course, very this is a major obstacle to building a consensus system, building a participatory governance, because the government, which has enjoyed a single-party majority for most of the last 14 years, and which is used to pushing bills through the parliament, no longer needs the majority. Meaning it doesn't even need to bring bills to the parliament. It can simply run through decrees under the state of emergency provisions. Now, my time in parliament also wasn't kind of the best example of participatory governance, because most bills would come to the parliament within a few days. They would be rushed through the committees. They would be rushed through the plenary. They would be voted in a few days, often with spelling and grammar mistakes, often with unintended consequences, and they would come back in 3 months in omnibus bills to be corrected. So Turkey, before the coup, had horrible governance. We had a clear majoritarian system where the parliament was simply a rubber stamp. But today, under the state of emergency provisions, there is no longer need for a rubber stamp. And you can just rule by decrees. And just to give you a couple of examples of what has happened in the parliament since the coup. Some of them through decrees, some of them through rushed bills, omnibus bills through the parliament. Turkey established a sovereign wealth fund that will not be scrutinized by the parliament or by the Court of Final Accounts. So, unaccountable sovereign wealth fund to be run by the government. A crazy idea. Compulsory private pension contributions. So all Turkish employees will now be forced to contribute to private pension funds. No debate with unions, no debate with employees, no debate with the opposition parties. Many of the military barracks in metropolitan areas will be handed over for real estate development projects. The military barracks are kicked out of metropolitan areas, which is probably a good idea, given Turkey's history of coup attempts. But the decisions taken as to this end have been taken unilaterally by the government. The parliament almost passed a bill through the majority that would give the president a monopoly over the appointment and removal from office of university rectors, university presidents. So the president would be solely authorized to appoint anyone he wants and to remove from office anyone he wants. And there was such an outroar in the parliament that it was withdrawn, which still shows that Turkey has some checks and balances, meaning which still shows the government, the AK Party government, has majority, and if they wanted, they could have pushed this bill through, but they took a step back. But again, it shows how on knife's edge things are, meaning how quite outrageous bills could come all the way to the parliament floor to be rejected at the last second. For example, Turkey's leading digital satellite provider, Digiturk, was just sold to a Qatari firm, a close partner of the ruling AK Party, without the sale terms being disclosed. And this was the leading digital satellite provider taken over by the government and is now handed over to Qatari friends of the government. Now you might wonder, why is this significant? Because basically this company decides which TV stations could come to your home and which you can't watch. Over the course of the last 5 years, just to give you an account of what happened, the number of channels that I can appear as an opposition MP on this digital satellite provider decreased from 2-digit numbers to 1 digit. Just to give you an idea. So he who basically controls the satellite channels controls the media in Turkey. And finally, the president was able to blackmail the banks and force them to lower interest rates. He told them, any bank that doesn't lower interest rates is a traitor. And in the post-coup environment, no bank manager will dare keep the interest rates. Now, those economists among you would find this crazy, right? How could interest rates be determined by a president and not by the markets themselves? But this is what happened in Turkey. So Turkey's current spirit of consensus and national unity also leads to such abuses of power, such excesses. Now, let me show you the other side of the coin, because some of you could say that lack of accountability could have positive effects. Because after all, electoral politics is not necessarily always, it doesn't always deliver the best results, as we also know from US politics these days. For example, what positive outcomes came out of the lack of accountability? Turkey, the last bill the Turkish parliament passed before going into recess after the coup was Turkey-Israel normalization bill. Normally there could be a lot of debate, a lot of anti-Semitic comments in the Turkish parliament, there could be a lot of exploiting of the bill, but the government rushed the bill through, and I'm sure they were very happy that this happened in the post-coup environment, because this was an embarrassing bill for a range of reasons, for an Islamist-rooted party, and they could just kind of push it through in this new environment. Turkey-Russia honeymoon, for example. Turkey was on the verge of fighting a war with Russia since it downed the Russian jet last November, but things have been really warming up since June, and the coup and the lack of accountability in the post-coup environment allowed Turkey to speed up the warming of relations with Russia, and now Putin and Erdogan seem to be best buddies. Now, if the parliament had more say and leeway, more legitimacy, we could have heard more kind of critical comments. A positive step was taken in the field of religious freedoms. Turkish policewomen received the right to wear the headscarf. Now, this, for various reasons, this was a controversial move, and had we not had the coup attempt, in fact, for the last 14 years, the Islamist-rooted AK Party stayed away from making this move, for various reasons. But only in the aftermath of the coup, they finally thought, okay, it's now safe to push this through. So again, lack of accountability, lack of a proper parliamentary procedure meant a positive step for Turkey's women and they are now, from this point on, they're entitled to wear the headscarf and work in Turkey's police force, which is a positive move also for women's labor force participation, which is at historic lows. It's not only the lowest in the OECD countries, it's also low within Turkey's own women's labor force participation history. Just around 30% for those of you interested. Now, you might wonder, why do the opposition parties play along? Why do they let this happen? Why does the main opposition CHP, the center-left party, why does the nationalist MHP, why does the pro-Kurdish HDP? There are a couple of different reasons. One is they feel that they have to play along in the spirit of nationalism. Second, they fear for their lives. Meaning, they know that given Turkey's media environment, they can be portrayed or smeared as coup plotters any given day, just as it happens every day to a politician or a journalist. So there are very high risks. And it's not just you will be branded a coup plotter. All your assets will be frozen. Your companies will be taken over. Your bank accounts will be taken over. You will lose your career. You will be in jail. Your relatives will be in jail, because there are a lot of punitive steps taken by the Turkish government. There are a lot of relatives of alleged coup plotters who ended up in jail. State of emergency measures. So I think opposition parties are trying to balance things. On the one hand, they feel they have to play along. They know this is an extraordinary moment. They feel this is what the public wants, consensus, unity. But at the same time, they wouldn't dare play it any otherwise. Now, of course, there's always a caveat about the pro-Kurdish HDP, and I'll come to that. They have a different set of constraints on their part. Now, how about the future? I've given you a brief overview of the coup, social and political developments. Where will this take Turkey to? First of all, as President Erdogan said, this was a gift from God for him. Although he was elected by popular vote, he's the first president to be elected by popular vote, which means with over 50% vote. In the monthly favorability rating polls, he has never received a 50% favorability, except for the post-coup poll. His highest before was 47%. Even a month after he was elected, his favorability was below 50. But now it's 67%. So it was indeed a gift from God. He has never been this legitimate and powerful. So that's one key factor to keep in mind. He is not only a strong one-man ruler, but also someone who enjoys high favorability ratings and who feels invincible. Second, behind the veneer of unity, as I tried to highlight, there is a lot of polarization, fissures, growing antagonisms, with significant repercussions to come in the decades ahead. Turkey is becoming a kind of a republic of fear. On the one hand, there is jubilance, national unity, the parliamentary regime defeated the coup, but on the other hand, there is a lot of self-censorship, withdrawal from public, toeing the national party line, joining the bandwagon, which is meaning the government censors don't have to do much work these days. Most of the independent media will now run the kind of stories that until recently only pro-government media ran. So something is happening to Turkey's media and public debate. And moreover, an ethos of snitching, smearing, is gaining hold. There are all sorts of accusations. Night and day, on TV, 24/7, people show up and they will accuse one another of being a coup plotter, of being a member of the Gülen network, which is allegedly behind the mastermind of the coup. In public offices, civil servants will be sending anonymous emails to police, kind of snitching one another. sometimes for personal vendetta reasons, sometimes simply as a defensive move. If I don't snitch the other person, he will or she will snitch me beforehand. So there is this atmosphere of fear with it, a deterioration of values that I've only seen in those of you familiar with the German novelist Hans Fallada. I don't know whether you've ever read him. That's the kind of moral decay so Turkey now appropriates some of the best pieces of German novels, examples of German novels. And overall, we hope this to be temporary, but there is an absolute lack of rule of law, due process, separation of powers, and checks and balances. And we fear that new victims of this new regime will lead to new vendettas, new resentments, and kind of future, let's say, retaliations. Now, I would argue, as I come to the end of my talk, that what Turkey today goes through is, of course, is a result of a false dichotomy. We are now extremely security-centric. It failed to traumatize us, and we say, you know what, everything else is suspended, security is key. And we believe there is like a zero-sum game of security versus democracy. We believe the more security there to be, we have to give up our rights and freedoms and democracy. I would argue democratic deficit in the Turkish case is actually leading to a security deficit. A state security deficit as well as a human security deficit. That is, Turkey, now my normative statement, I think Turkey needs to move out of its false dichotomy of security versus democracy and adopt a comprehensive security approach. As I told you, the minorities are the canaries in the coal mine. They're the first ones to, in fact, for us to see that something horrible is taking place in our society. Then I fear for the future of Kurds, the systematic exclusion of the pro-Kurdish HDP from all these processes, the escalation of the fight within Turkey, the Turkey's incursion into Syria, and the clashes with the Syrian affiliate of the PKK, YPG, in Turkey. All of these point to the possibility of the current tensions escalating further into tensions with the Kurds and further fighting, suicide bombs, brutal terrorist attacks all around the country. And then, of course, the Alevis might be the next, Turkey's non-Sunni Muslim minority, and ultimately, I think it will be the seculars who fear that as different groups in Turkish society become victims of this senseless violence and victimization and labeling and scapegoating, the different communities feel that, will I be the next? Who will be the next? Will it be the Kurds? Will it be the Alevis? Will it be the kind of more progressed seculars? Or some of you in the audience might argue, maybe these are completely unfounded fears. Maybe Turkey is moving to a new era of consensus where everyone will be an equal partner in an emerging nation. But unfortunately, I can't share that enthusiasm from what I'm seeing back in Turkey. A few points about the international repercussions. Why should you care here in Chapel Hill about what's going on there? First, the country I'm talking about is the second largest army in NATO. I know a lot of people on this side of the US are now isolationists, and you don't care much for either for Europe or NATO, but trust me, I will not say NATO matters. Trust me, the world cares about you. You might not care about Putin, but he cares about you. You might not care about authoritarian regimes rising all around the world, including in Central and Eastern Europe, but they care about you. Which means NATO is significant and will remain to be significant. And I think it's key for American public to be informed and caring about the second largest army in NATO. Especially because Turkey's Incirlik Air Base, a key American air base, is the base through which counter-Islamic State operations are carried out. So Turkey and the US are partners in this operation. And also because Turkish troops are now boots on the ground in Syria, fighting the Islamic State at times, and fighting US's key ally in Syria, YPG, at other times. So you have to think about Turkey because you are trying to manage a crazy alliance. US works with YPG and US works with Turkey very closely, two historical enemies, because for Turkey, YPG equals PKK. So yes, the State Department, Pentagon, White House, they're trying to juggle. And what happens to Turkey will have a major implication on this juggling act. The second is because Turkey is an EU accession country, and a key EU accession country. It could have a major repercussion for the future of the EU. And you might say, why should we care about the European Union? Especially now that there seems to be Brexit. Now that the European Union seems to be falling apart. The best anecdote I've ever seen about why the Union is important comes from a British Tory kind of legislator, a lord, whose aide shared this with me. He said, you know what I became? A pro-European, pro-Union person. He said, I was on a battle tank in Arnhem during the Second World War. This is a history we have forgotten. We need the Union, not because we want to standardize cucumbers and bananas in the European Union, which is also what the Union does, but because this is a Union that came out of the worst catastrophe in the world history. Over 50 million people died, and we learned a lesson. Not in a parliament, not in the marketplace, not in a factory, not in a university, but on battle tanks. And too bad that we're forgetting that lesson. The third, and this brings NATO and the EU together, is because Turkey hosts now 3 million Syrian refugees. And you just had your 10,000 refugee, right, this week. And you were very proud. And Turkey is EU's major partner in the refugee group. And if Turkey itself becomes a country sending Turkish and Kurdish refugees as an outcome of this instability, imagine what that would imply, not only for the European Union, but also for US politics. If you have 3 million Syrian refugees, as well as, let's say, 1 to 2 million Turkish and Kurdish dissidents, marching toward EU countries, you can bet it will have major repercussions on US elections as well. So overall, I would argue that you should care about Turkey's drift away from transatlantic values of parliamentary democracy, rule of law, rights and freedoms, as well as the alliance itself. Turkey is your southeast flank country. It borders Russia, Iran, Iraq, Syria. It has the straits. It's a key country that has been a major security partner. And if it continues to drift to Russian orbit, if it continues its honeymoon with Iran, you can bet that you will bear the consequences too. And this is a Turkey that has been flirting with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. 2 years before Turkey shut down the Russian jet, back then Prime Minister Erdogan turned to Putin and said, take us into Shanghai Cooperation Organization and we'll say farewell to the European Union. And then Turkey tried to procure Chinese air defense system, surface-to-air missile defense system. Now, it could have been the first time a NATO country buys Chinese military equipment to plug it into the NATO mainframe. Now, even for those of you who don't care the least bit about military issues, if I bring you a Chinese USB stick drive, would you stick it to your laptop without having questions about hackers, viruses, Trojans? So this is what Turkey was about to do. It was about to buy Chinese military equipment and connect it to the NATO mainframe. These are the kinds of risks Turkey's drift means for you and for your air defense system and for your NATO alliance, not only for Turkey. And my conclusion should be a dose of optimism after all these. Why you should be concerned about Turkey, why you should care about Turkey, and why you should be concerned about Turkey. And let me finish with another Turkey. What Turkey could be and why it could change things for you too. Let's go back to 1949, 4 years after people got off from tanks. November 17th, in Strasbourg, which is the seat of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And this is when European nations were coming under the umbrella of the Council of Europe. This is not the European Union, this is the Council of Europe, which Turkey is one of the initial members. Right from the start, Turkey was there. And there was a Turkish politician, Kasım Gülek, the Secretary General of the political party that I belong to. And he had a speech there. It's one of the first meetings ever of the Parliamentary Assembly. And he said, European nations have hundreds of years of prejudice and traditions. He said, we have to overcome it. He said, we can overcome it. We believe that this union is possible. We are present here to found that union. Our goal is a United States of Europe. Our goal must be a United States of Europe. Now, this is a Turkey that goes more than 60 years. So this was a different Turkey. This was a Turkey that tried to be one of the bridge builders in Europe. That was one of the forces behind a new union of European nations. And it was right there from the start. Those of you who follow Turkey's accession process know that it has been going on for the last 53 years. Turkey signed the association agreement on September 12, 1963. In 13 days, we will commemorate the 53rd anniversary of our never-ending accession process. That's one Turkey to think about, a bobbed accession process. But another Turkey that I'm mentioning here is 1949, a Turkey that saw itself as a founding member of the Council of Europe and as one of the architects of a future United States of Europe, beyond the prejudice, beyond the mass killings, beyond the carnage of the Second World War. And I think if we think about Turkey and a future Europe that also includes Turkey, it could be a good way to think about our transatlantic future. Because ultimately, if we want to continue to enjoy our rights and freedoms, whether it's the markets, whether it's the human rights, whether it's the due process and rule of law, whether it's checks and balances, whether it's gender equality, whether it's media freedoms, whether it's the First Amendment, trust me, it doesn't require building walls, because no wall can protect the US in a global age. Only bridges can protect the United States. Only engagement can ensure the freedoms. And I believe that Turkey is a linchpin of that transatlantic bridge. Turkey is a linchpin of a future, robust, successful European Union. Let me end with a Greek colleague of mine, a professor at Oxford, who said, Turkey could be the Viagra of Europe, she said. This was at a time when there were high hopes for Turkey becoming a full member of the European Union. So if we stop thinking about Turkey as a problem and start thinking about Turkey as an asset, then I think it could make a great contribution to the transatlantic alliance, to the future European Union. And I know that it takes more than your thinking to do it. It also takes Turkish citizens' self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-critique. And when the two comes together, I hope, both in Turkey and in Brussels and in Washington, D.C., we will be looking at a much more optimistic picture. Thank you.